Hello everybody, I'm Mr. Garland, and today I'll be walking you through how to do your both sides section of your argumentative research site. So let's just go and look at what I've put together on our sample site. So the first thing that you'll notice is an infographic. I also have some below my written portion, and these are just infographics that I found to help illustrate the points that get made in my written section. So you want to make sure that they're relevant, and if you can include where you got them, like you'll notice that ADL is who created this particular infographic, that's best. Like, don't crop that out. That would be silly to remove your sources, especially during a research project. However, the meat of this section is in the written portion. And you'll notice that in mine, I chose to do the argument for and the argument against. And I was actually strategic about where I put those because I knew I had more information for the argument against. So I decided to start with the argument for so that you could see information and get a sense of what this side tends to think about these arguments. But then you would get into the meat and potatoes of the argument that I was more prepared to offer and end with the idea that I kind of want you to walk away thinking more about. However, now that you see what it looks like, let's get into how I made it. Now, when it comes to the images, I really just use the image button on Google Sites, but you can also use a few other options. I played around with the idea of an image carousel, but because all of my pictures weren't the same shape, the carousel looked really funky. But if you have like a whole bunch of images that are all the exact same shape, that would work perfectly. You could just scroll through and then you could have more information in a smaller section. I, on the other hand, just hit images, I hit upload, and I did have to download these images before I could use them. But if you choose the select option, you can also find images that are in your Google Drive. You can search for them by URL, or you can just do a Google image search or go through your own personal photos. Those are all options that you can use to find images to put on your specific Google site. And then where I could have written the written portion on a Google Doc and then copy and pasted it over to my Google site, I actually just chose to open a text box and type directly onto the page. I will definitely need to go back and edit, and this won't give me some of the good functions that Google Docs has, like spell check and a grammar checker. So you want to be careful with that, and I do actually advise doing it on a Google Doc first, but I'm being very honest about my process and how I went through this. So I opened up a text box, and it opens up clean and simple. And then I did choose to center my two subheadings so that you had an idea like, okay, this is the argument for, this is the argument against, and they're clearly separated. So I know what I'm reading and I know what kind of arguments I'm putting in there. Then as I typed, anytime that I used information from a source that wasn't my own head, I had to give credit. And how we do that is with in-text citations. So for example, right here, I guess I'll try and say this, Kurlikowski, that's one of my sources. If you go to the works referenced section, you will find a Kurlikowski source. But how do I know what to put inside of the parentheses, right? Do I put an author's last name? Do I put a page number? Do I put a list of things there? Well, NoodleTools has the answer to that. So I'll go back to all of my sources from NoodleTools. I'll go to options and I'll choose in-text citation. And what NoodleTools will do is it'll give me an idea of where I put the in-text citation and what I put inside of the in-text citation. So for instance, if I reference the source in the sentence, I don't have to put the name in parentheses at the end of the sentence. That doesn't make any sense. So any instance that you are going to cite, you can find how to cite it here on NoodleTools. However, as you're going through, you always want to give credit to whoever came up with this information. You might want to just rely on over citation just to be safe. So maybe you do know this information, but like back it up with a source because you're not currently an expert in this field that you're talking about, unless your paper is about like being a junior in high school. And also not paper. We're working on a Google site, but like be more creative than that, I guess. I don't know. However, As you're looking through this, you can also see that I had different kinds of things that I needed to cite. For instance, I have a book right here, so I needed to include a page number. I had a source with 2 authors, so I had to figure out how to include both authors' last name. Do I alphabetize them? How does that work? And then my last source is actually a work with more than 2 authors, and that includes this like little et al edition, which is like Latin. But again, NoodleTools told me how to do it. I just put it in there. I followed the instructions, and it turned out like this. So as you're writing, you do want to devote about 200 to 250 words per side. So I went a little bit above that. As you can tell, I think we're in the 700s by the time this is all said and done. And that's fine too. I mean, if you go over, that's fine. I would not go under though. I would not choose to go under 250. If you can't hit 250 words for one of the sides, that's evidence to me as the person grading this assignment that you haven't actually done enough research for it. So keep that in mind as you're working. You do want to hit about 200 to 250 for each one, and make sure that you cite any information that you have. Find some good informational images that you can also include so that your reader can also take a visual break and not necessarily just have to read a whole bunch of text, but see what you're saying in a visual representation as well. When you're finished writing and you have all of the images that you'd like to include, always remember to hit publish so that the work saves, and so that when I click your link, I see this information and not just whatever you had last week. That's basically it for both sides. If you have any questions, please feel free to let us know. Other than that, take care of yourselves, wash your hands, and we'll see you again next week for the next step.